Let real people living real lives serving a real God. Welcome home. I'll see you at 11 a.m. Let me just say that while you're doing that, the vision at Christ Point Church, while you're doing that with your cell phones, the vision at Christ Point Church is simple. We're real people. We're living real lives. We're serving a real God. We're building real relationships with real individuals. We're connecting real people and real families to one another, and we're always connecting them to the Lord, and we're doing that at home. So no better place to do that than at home. And radio listeners, it's good to have you guys with us this morning. I'm so glad and honored that you're tuning in with us. We expect to see you in person at one of our campuses, which would be Sparta and Smithfield. Sparta at 9 and 11, Smithfield at 11. We'll see you at one of those, and I look forward to seeing you. Ben Lowman viewers, good to have you on board with us. Simply just entitled this morning, Kings. Let me just say this morning, God laid this on my heart. I'm leaving here. I'm going to Smithfield. I'm going to preach this very sermon at Smithfield. I believe we need to be on board. So you're stuck with Johnny Hood at 11 a.m. So you're stuck with him. So anyway, I just want to jump right in. Kings. Now, for those of us in this room that will wreck a car in order to get to a card game, you know what I'm talking about here. And you know who I'm talking about too, Mom. But somebody asked me, how's your mom? I'm like, well, she's good one of these days. How's she doing? I'm like, she's real good. One of these days we're going to find her dead in a ditch going to play poker or something like that when she's about 108 years old. So taking somebody's money, if you ever gamble with her, don't, I'm telling you, she'll take your money. But anyway, Joshua chapter 1, verse 3. God laid this on my heart 2-3 weeks back. I'm so excited about it, and I've had it on my heart, and I want to bring it to us. I want to bring it to both campuses as we join together, as we unify to see where God's taking us. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised Moses. Let me read that one more time, and I want you to say, oh my gosh, oh my. You know, I'm not asking for amens. Morris was on board with me here. But I'm telling you, every time I read it, I'm like, oh my word, Lord, this is so cool. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just like I promised Moses. Think about this. Here is God speaking to Joshua. If you want to get me excited, get me in the book of Joshua. Here is God speaking to Joshua. Moses has died. Moses is not the leader of the people anymore. Joshua's been exalted to that position. Joshua is that new leader, and God is reminding Joshua what has already been promised to Moses. So let me just tell you something here. I want to digress just a little bit onto a sermon all by itself. This could be a sermon by itself. God's promise doesn't change with the times. God's promise doesn't alter as we get feeling good or feeling bad. God's promise, I promised, and it is word for word, verbatim, in Deuteronomy chapter 11, I think it is, all the way over to this third verse in chapter 1 of Joshua. He is reminding him, this is what I told Moses, and I'm telling you the same thing. I'm not changing my mind. I'm not backing up. Every place that the soles of your foot shall tread upon, I have given it to you. I want you to remember that. Let's keep that in mind as we look at what God's calling us to do. I want to look at verse 5 real quick before we move on. Verse 5. Then this is what he says. Just in case you have that Steve Qualls mentality, just in case you have that insecurity, just in case you have something in you that says this can't be done, this is what I want to remind you of. No man shall be able to stand against you or before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, I'm going to be with you, and I'm not going to leave you and forsake you. Just as I was with Moses, not one person will be able to stand against you. Let me make a note here, just in case. I want to make a note. No land has been conquered yet. No land of the promise has been conquered yet. Joshua is being... A generation earlier, Moses has been given this very same word. Now Joshua has been given it. He's standing before the Lord. The Lord has reminded him, and not one foot has been set into the promised land yet. Not one army has been faced. Not one assembling of troops has gone underway just as of yet. And remember, I'm going to tell you this, just in case you don't know where we are in this book. I'm going to tell you, the land is inhabited with kings. The land is inhabited with kings. Just because God promises to us doesn't mean it's going to be easy. God, the land is inhabited with kings, and the kings are number two. That was number one. Number two, the kings are giants. The kings are big. Back 40 years earlier, they didn't go into the land because we are grasshoppers in their sight. They are giants in the land. These are the people that scared the living daylights out of us. Which brings me to number three. Israel has already been scared off from them once. Now they have to face them again. Let me tell you something. Sometimes we've got to face kings that we faced before. Sometimes the kings just don't go away as easily as what we'd want them to. Sometimes I think a lot of times we would rather that God take the kings away and make our road easy. But that doesn't make our faith stronger. So I want you to know, when we look at this, the land is inhabited with kings. Let me back up. No land has been conquered yet. The land is inhabited with kings. So God is telling him this before he has to go into battle. I'm just going to tell you, just so you know, that land I have given to you. That is your land. And when you go into it, these guys aren't going to see it the way you see it. So the land is inhabited with kings. The kings are giants, and Israel has already been scared off from them 40 years earlier. So I want you to be thinking right now as we go through this, because we're going to look at our kings. I want you to be thinking right now, what king have I been scared to death to face? Look at it and let's go there. God is telling Joshua, I've already told Moses this. I've already told him this, and now I'm telling you. It was Moses' responsibility. I want to break this down, get somewhere before we move on. It was Moses' responsibility to catapult forward to the people God's message. It was his responsibility to make sure, as the messenger of God, as the visionary, the one that led the people, I have to tell you and catapult forward to you. Because if all I ever do is pass down, then it gets left on the down. But I've got to catapult forward, and I've got to let the people know that there is movement past Moses. So it's Moses' responsibility to catapult forward the message that God is sending to the people. Now he's gone. And Joshua is charged with that same responsibility. It is his charge and responsibility to catapult forward God's message to the people. It's his responsibility. Now they stand closer to the promise than they've ever stood before. A brand new generation, a brand spanking new generation stands before a brand new promise. And I'm going to tell you, I realize my role, and I'm going to accept my role. It's my responsibility and my charge to catapult forward the message God has given us today. That is my responsibility, and I'm not going to leave it laying on the table. Here's the responsibility. Here's our charge. It's time to start soul trading. It's time to start soul trading outside the walls. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm speaking to the choir because our church has done a wonderful job of that. But I just want all of us to get on the same page and to see what we're up against. It's time to start soul trading outside of the walls. It's time to move the vision past the city limits sign. Now, we've already done that. Now, I'm going to tell you, in doing this, it's not something that everybody says, oh, okay, well, we can do that. We can do that. Everybody that I talk to says you can't do that. We've already done that. We've already moved the vision outside of the city limits sign. We've moved the vision. It's time to move the vision past the boundaries of human reasoning. Why? Why would you want to do that? Because I'm going to tell you, I've heard people say, well, why would we want to go to Smithville when we can help people here? Well, why can't we help people in Smithville? See what I mean? What God puts in the mind of the pastor has to come out, and it has to be set forth, and it has to be without boundaries. We can't put boundaries of human reasoning around what God has called us to do. I think God is telling us today that it's time to move. It's time to move. It's time to move. There's Sparta people, Smithville people, and there's more to know the Lord. There's more to know what it's like to walk into a church and to know that you have that overwhelming sense of love and acceptance. And you have somebody that hugs you and they don't even know you. You've got somebody that puts their arms around you and says you are important to us, and they don't even know you when they do that. So there's something to be said for loving people unconditionally. But let me show you something before we move on. Let me show you something in Joshua chapter 12. Now, Joshua chapter 1, they're getting ready to go into the land. Joshua chapter 12, they've been in the land just a little bit. Verse 1 and verse 7, I want to read them back to back. Now these are the kings of the land whom the people of Israel defeated and took possession. Now we can read the rest of that, but here's the key verse I'm keying in on. And these are the kings that were defeated. Let's look at verse 7. And these are the kings of the land whom Joshua and the people of Israel defeated. We've got the west side and we've got the east side. And as we go on in verse 12, 31, it says at the very end of the chapter, it says 31 in all, not including the two on the east side of the river. So there's 34 kings that had to be defeated. And as it goes on, God says in chapter 13, there's more land to be had. There's more lands to conquer, more kings to face. So this is what I want us to know today. We're not done, and kings aren't going to give up easily. See, and these are the kings that were defeated. Let me give you 6 rules of engagement when it comes to the kings. Number 1, there's always a king to defeat. There's always a king that needs defeating. There's always a king. And if we don't think it, then I'm going to tell you it is. If we want to pretend like it's not, it doesn't make it go away. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have to face these kings at some point. If we're going to move on forward, we're going to have to face kings. Number 2, there's always a king that has taken up residence. These kings literally thought that that was their land. See, they don't know God, and they don't know that God has told Joshua that they're sitting in your house. So they don't know that. So that king is going to fight for what he thinks is his. So I'm going to tell you, the kings that we're facing in our minds right now thinks that he has ownership to your emotions. He thinks that he has ownership to your thoughts. He thinks he has ownership of your future. But he does not. We've got to face the kings and we've got to do battle with them. Number 3, there's always a king that doesn't want to give ground as badly as we want to take it. There's always a king that's inhabiting our land. There's always a king there. And there's always a king that's so diligent about hanging on as much as we are about taking. He's not wanting to let go with everything that's in him. And number 4, kings don't give up easily. Kings don't give up easily. Kings have the authority to call in other troops to support what he wants. Kings don't give up easily. Number 5, Joshua's kings were giants. Don't kid ourselves and think that our kings aren't giants also. Joshua's kings are giants. I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about. When you are sitting there and you're saying, I don't know if my son will ever come to the Lord, it looks like it's a giant. I don't know if that debt will ever be out of the way, it looks like a giant. I don't know. I can't move past the memory of what once was, it is a giant. I can't get past this, it is a giant. I can't do this, I can't do that. I can't, because it is a giant. Because we look too quickly upon human reasoning and not enough upon holy intervention and holy presence. And you know what? We look too much at the scenario and say it can't be done. Joshua's kings were giants, and only 2 of those 12 guys that went in said, I don't care if they're giants, we go and we do battle. But they were overruled by 10 others that literally swayed the entire group of people to say, look, we can't do this. Remember how big those kings were. Now, I want you to know, you may be sitting here and saying, I'm facing something in my life that beat me down 10 years ago. I'm going to tell you, today's the day that we grab that king by his neck and put our foot on it. Today's the day when we say, look, I'm sick and tired of you. I'm sick and tired of kings. And let me tell you, if you don't think it's going to happen, then you go right into verse 12 in Joshua and you'll see that they had to defeat kings. Number 5 was Joshua's kings were giants. Number 6, our kings will always look like giants. They'll always look like giants. Whatever we're facing will always, the devil will make sure that that king looks bigger than anything else in the picture. I can't see moving past the city limits sign because I can't see the city limits sign because the giant of an issue or problem stands before us. I'm going to tell you what God has done for me in my life, and I'm glad that He did it. I've never looked at a situation in a monetary fashion and said we can't or we can based upon what we have in the bank account. Because I'm going to tell you something, we did not have enough money to move to Smithville. I promise you, there is not enough money to do what God was calling us to do. I knew it. We've talked about it. It bore witness with our leadership. It bore witness with our staff, with the people. And you know what? When God started laying on my heart a year and a half ago, Smithville, there was only one Smithville couple coming at the time. And then all of a sudden, Smithville people started coming. And we started talking about it. And we started seeing that God laid it out. I stood in my bedroom or in my bathroom and looked at the mirror one day. And I got scared for the first time. Lord, I don't think we can do this. And overwhelmingly, God says, then you know I'm doing it and you're not. And I just got re-energized. I'm like, okay, I don't know how this is going to happen, but it's going to happen. And did we have hundreds of thousands of dollars to put into building renovation, sound, lighting, chairs, even coffee filters? Did we have enough money to do that? Absolutely not. 100% not. And then at the 11th hour, I'm going to get Jimbo and Diane Edens were the pastor at the church that it's called Revitalization. We took that church. We're revitalizing it right now. And they were the ones that stepped out of the way. They're going to get back on board with us. And I'm going to have them here. And I'm going to introduce you to these wonderful, selfless people who says, look, the vision is greater than my hunger and my want to. The vision is greater than my selfishness. So they moved and they said at the 11th hour, here is everything you need. Start going. What wonderful, wonderful individuals. So let me just tell you this, and I want you to record it. I want you to put it in your phone, put it in your tablet, write it down somewhere. When we step out in faith, God shows up in power. When we step out in faith, God shows up in power. Now, I'm talking a little bit about the church, about what God is calling us to do, but I'm also talking about the individual too. We've got kings we got to face. Because your kings sometimes filter into our kings. We've got to face kings. We've got to do battle. When we step out in faith, God shows up in power. Moses stepped out in faith against a multitude of giants. I'm going to break down 2 or 3 of them for you real quick. He walked into a nation of Egypt that was the most powerful and greatest nation on the face of the earth at the time. The leader, which was called Pharaoh, literally looked upon himself as a god, and the people did too. And Moses talked to him just like he was nothing. But respected him and said, "Oh, king, I know you. You remember me? Let my people go." He stood in the face of a giant and said, "My people's got to get out of here, and it's going to happen the easy way or the hard way." And God made sure it went the hard way. So then he assembled 2 million people. 2 million people Moses organized and led them on a trek out of Egypt. I don't know of anywhere I've ever heard, and we will never hear of where one man assembled over 2 million people and led them in a common goal. It will not happen in today's society. He stood before the Red Sea. Don't think that's not a giant. This thing is so big. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? That's a giant. That's a giant. The Red Sea's a giant. The army behind us that wants to kill us is a giant. And God made a way. Moses stood in faith against a multitude of giants, and Joshua did also. He stood in faith. 2 million people that were transient, homeless people, he led across into a promised land. He went with the Lord, he went against the most powerful city in the land, the most fortified city, with nothing but a shout and a trumpet blast, and God let that city fall before them. They were attacked by 5 Amorite kings, and they beat them so badly that they never recovered from it. Don't think that they didn't face giants, but great faith produces produces great power from God, but let me tell you something, it doesn't remove the giants. It stops the giants, but it doesn't remove the giants. Joshua could have very easily just said, God, I want to sit back and let you do my battle, and I'm going to hang out here and be on the safe end of it. But he didn't do that. He prayed, God, give me another day of daylight to make sure I get this battle won. Instead, he went into a deeper battle. See, the kings are always going to be bigger. They're always going to be bigger. Always. The kings are always going to tell you it can't be done. The kings are going to tell you it can't be done. You're going to stand in front of the mirror and you're going to say, God, are you telling us to move to another city? It can't be done. The kings are always going to tell us it can't be done. The kings are always going to say, don't do it. The kings are always going to say, you're not good enough. That's what the kings are going to say. They're going to say you're not good enough. You don't have enough knowledge. You don't have enough backing. You don't have enough influence. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to introduce you to my kings. Just a couple of them. I'm going to introduce you to my kings in just a bit. And then I want us to look at your kings. You're not getting out real easy. I'm not going to be the only one up here on the chopping block. I'm going to introduce you to my kings, then we're going to look at your kings. Because I want you to know this and record this. If we don't battle kings now, we can't tread ground later. If we don't battle kings now, we can't tread ground later. First, before we do that, I want to look at Esau. I want to look at Esau. I'm not going to put it on the board. I'm just going to tell you about Esau real quick. Esau, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob was the younger brother. Esau was the older brother. Esau wanted to just live life just charismatically, just impromptu. Jacob planned. Esau sold his birthright to his brother for a bowl of soup. He was the older brother. We all know the story. If you don't, go into Genesis chapter 25, I believe it is, and read it. Come to one of us, and we will walk you through it. Esau couldn't see past the now. I want you to get this with me. Esau couldn't see past the now. If you have children, you know what the now sounds like. I'm starving. You're not starving. You're not starving. I don't see ribs yet. I'm about to die. No, you're not about to die. You're not. You see, and if you're a wife, you know, I'm about to die here, honey. I'm going to eat it as it's getting done. See, Esau couldn't see past the now. I don't care about later. I don't care about what you see, Jacob. All I see is the now. All I see is the giant of hunger in front of me. That's all I see. And when we can't see, then we settle. Remember that. When we fail to see, then we settle. If it's sports, if we don't see the victory, then we settle for the loss. If we don't see the shot, then we miss the shot. We have to see it in order to possess it. If we don't see it, we'll settle. So it's time to see past off-brand soup. It's time to start seeing the vision God has set before us. I want to show you what my kings look like. And I want to be transparent before you. I want to show you what my kings look like. And remember, they're always big. They're always big. Mine's not little either. They're not small. They're just like your kings. It's the thing you wake up to sometimes over and over and over. Because I'm going to tell you something. Starting Saturday, we launched a brand new church last Sunday. Starting Saturday, the kings started coming after us. The kings didn't wait around for us to step foot into their territory. They started coming after us. But I want to tell you what my kings look like. Who are you to lead a church and cast vision? Oh, you're just a ditch digger. Let me tell you something. I sit in my alone time, in my quiet time, and I know what it sounds like. Who are you to lead a church? Who are you to cast vision? You're just a ditch digger. You know what? Your daddy wasn't a preacher. You have no preachers in your family. Nobody's going to pay attention to you. You're just a ditch digger. And if you don't know my story, I was a ditch digger. See, the words from 1998 reverberate over and over and over. Some days I use it for fuel, and some days I have to kick it aside, but every day I have to beat that king back. Sometimes we fight a little bit. Sometimes he may even get me down. But the words sitting across that table from my pastor and my mentor, where we conversated to a point to where I made him mad, and he looked at me and said, "You will never amount to anything in ministry. Ever. You are a product of what I made you, and you'll never be anything other than that." That king, I know what sounds like. Those two men are not even alive to this day. I'm the only one left that was in that room that knows what the conversation was. See, that king wants to come against your value that you bring to the table, and against your vision, and against your self-worth. That king wants to come against you and tell you that you're not good enough. That was number one. Number two, I have kings screaming in my ear right now. Every time I step in the pulpit, every time I sit in a meeting, every single time, I have a king screaming in my ear right now, "You're the fun guy. You're the fun guy." People like the fun guy, but people don't like being led by the fun guy. You're the fun one. You're the one everybody wants to be around, but they don't want to be led. I had somebody tell me that one time. Stop being the fun guy. Start leading people. Stop being their friend. Start fathering them in the Lord. Don't think that I don't hear it all the time. You're the fun guy. Nobody wants to be led by the fun guy. Number three, I look at the kings in the mirror every single day. You're too old to make a difference. You should have done this 20 years ago when you were a little bit younger. You're too old to make a difference. So I want you to know, I've heard the kings my whole life. Hey guys, you were doing this, and you stopped on us, and you watched us, and I appreciate it. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending some time with us. I pray that you enjoyed the service today. Let me take this opportunity to invite you out personally. We're located on the square in Sparta. Our service times are at 9 and 11 every Sunday morning. We'll meet you at the door with a hug. We'll meet you at the door with some coffee ready and some donuts if you want. And let me just take a real quick minute to invite you over to our Smithville campus. For those of you who can't drive over to Sparta, drive over to Smithville, 11 o'clock for now, at 614 Murphy Street in Smithville, Tennessee. So one of our campuses, Christ Point Church, we're real people, we're living real lives, and we're serving a real God. Welcome home.